This episode is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the #1 seller of games and gaming accessories. And GatheringMagic.com, the #1 resource for Magic the Gathering news and articles.
Welcome back, guys. I'm going to be doing a 3-match set versus Reid today. He wants to play against the 3 breakout decks from the Pro Tour, namely Robots, Eggs, and Infect. The first deck I'm going to quickly go over is the Robots deck, which I have in front of me. So this deck has been around for quite a while, off and on from 2004 or so, and we're finally to this point where most of the artifact lands are banned, but you have 8 Nexuses, which is pretty great. Inkmoth Nexus lets you randomly beat stuff like Soul Sisters, which is normally a pretty tough matchup, but like even if they gain like 30 plus life, 10 poison still kills them. You have 4 Memnites, 4 Mox Opal, 2 Welding Jar, and 4 Ornithopters. 0 casting cost artifacts are pretty important to turning on Mox Opal, as well as tapping to Springleaf Drum to add mana. So, in a lot of scenarios, suppose you have like an Ornithopter and a Springleaf Drum, you just play Springleaf Drum on turn 1, and if you don't have another play, you shouldn't even play the Ornithopter, because it will produce a mana next turn. And if you don't get to attack with it or something next turn, there's no real reason to play it on that turn. Signal Pest is pretty good at being a sort of glorious anthem, as is Steel Overseer and Master of Ethereum. Arcbound Ravager has been referred to as a fairy godmother of this deck for a lot of reasons. Namely, it makes it really hard to just trade 1-for-1 removal spells all the time with this deck. So, if you have a Ravager and a bunch of cheap artifacts, it's just very difficult to trade profitably with everything they have. Vault Scourge is another... It's actually a 1-drop most of the time. It should be on this part of the curve. It's pretty good with Cranial Plating, which is still the best card in the deck. Plating, that is. Some builds have Steel Shaper's Gift. Some have Galvanic Blast or Shrapnel Blast. The build that I'm testing is blue-based, because I think that's better at being resilient to Jund. Burn spells aren't the best versus Jund. Thoughtcast is very good at just like grinding out games, and so is Master being another big threat like Cranial Plating. In the sideboard, we just have a bunch of random things that are good some of the times. Whip Flare is pretty good against like Neopod, Moirapod, anything that has a lot of small creatures. It doesn't kill any of the creatures in your deck, which is pretty huge. Dismember is like a catch-all. Thoughtseize, just for combo decks essentially. You wouldn't really want to board it in versus like Jund or something. Edge Champion is basically a anti-creature / Jund card. It's very bad at racing combo decks, which is, I think, why it's not in the main deck for this build. Torpor Orb is for Pod, Splinter Twin. Cannis is for Storm, and Eggs as well, because they have to cast multiple instants on that turn, like Fate's Reward and Second Sunrise. Rust in Peace is a pretty good graveyard hate card. In fact, I think it's like one of the best graveyard hate cards ever printed. And 2 Ancient Grudge for mirror matches. The second deck I want to show you is, let's bring it up, is Infect. So this is very close to a build that top-8'd, I believe. It's kind of hard to see everything here, so let's move these. So this deck is pretty good at doing the same thing every game. 4 Inkmoth Nexus, 4 Glistener Elf, 4 Blighted Ancient, 2 Ichor Claw Mirror. So that's 14 Infect creatures, 12 15, 17, 21 pump spells if we count Noble Hierarch. And I do, because Hierarch is very good at giving you green mana and pumping your guy for 1 Infect, which is kind of a big deal. Normally the limitations on this deck were having enough green mana to operate effectively. Hierarch does basically everything you want it to do, so it's very good. Pendlehaven is also a pump spell, and also taps for green mana, so that's pretty great. Gitaxian Probe, not sure about it, but guess letting you know that it's completely safe to all in is pretty reasonable. And then you have 7 cantrips. I'm not really sure I actually like the cantrips. I remember talking to Ari about this, and he just had more pump spells, and I think that might just be better, because all you want to draw is pump spells and Infect guys. However, for post-board games, it might be a bit worse to not have cantrips, because there are certain cards you want to find. Speaking of which, the cards that are kind of important are Spell Pierce, Spellskite for opposing removal spells, Creeping Corrosion, Dismember to kill Moira, which someone actually played against me and in 2 games yesterday, and I still lost because I couldn't kill all of his Moiras. And Negate for other combo decks. I'm not sure that the Negate is necessary. Spell Pierce is very good because it costs so little mana. But besides that, this deck has been consistently killing on turn 3 or 4 for me, which is pretty reasonable. And once you add in Spell Pierce as a post board, I think it's very hard to lose to another combo deck. The reason we have Creeping Corrosion boarded is I think it's sometimes hard to beat robots. I still don't like it that much because it costs 4 mana, and our deck only has 19 lands and 4 Noble Hierarch. And they're going to be constantly attacking all of our creatures in that matchup. And if they have something like Opposing Spellskite and perhaps Spell Pierce, some of the robots builds I've seen do have Spell Pierce. I don't really like Corrosion that much. The last breakout deck is the deck that Stanislav Cifka, I believe is how you pronounce his name, basically went in Constructed. He went 9-1 in the Swiss, and then 3-0 in the top 8 with this deck, which is Second Sunrise combo. The first origins of this deck, from what I remember, is 2005 Worlds, once Ghost Quarter was printed. You would just cast a bunch of eggs back then, which were like Darkwater Egg, Chromatic Sphere, and Chromatic Star, and Lotus Bloom. Maybe it was in 2005. It was 2005 or 2006. You would just cast a bunch of artifacts that drew you cards, sacrifice all of them somehow, cast Second Sunrise, get them all back, make a bunch of mana, either cast like an X spell, Banefire, or recycle Pyrite Spellbomb 10 times to kill them with. Which, it sounds kind of painful on paper, but it's not actually that bad once you start getting to like 5 cards in your library or so, because you just keep stacking the Pyrite Spellbomb on the bottom of your library. You do have to be careful not to deck yourself, but at some point you can just stop sacrificing all of your artifacts and like sacrifice 4 per iteration to keep yourself safe. Some builds have Banefire and Croc Clan Ironworks. I don't really like that. I think Ironworks is pretty much a bad draw. Banefire is like okay because it has utility and killing like some annoying creature like, I guess, Gadok Teague. Teague doesn't even do that much. Canist or Revoker maybe. Or Meddling Mage. But I think overall those cards are kind of not very hard to beat if you practice a lot with the deck. I think Chalice on 1 might be very annoying. Like a Chalice on 1 and a Chalice on 2 seems very hard for this deck to beat. Stony Silence also very difficult. And the thing about Echoing Truth is, if people start splitting up their hate cards, like having one Rest in Peace, one Relic of Progenitus, one Tormod's Crypt, one Nihil Spellbomb, and so forth, it's going to be much harder to just rely on Echoing Truth to answer all of them, because you need to find 2 or 3 Echoing Truths to answer all of their hate cards. You have 2 Silence in the main deck, because I think he just wanted to have a hedge against decks with a lot of counters, or so forth. And there's enough cantrips in the deck that you can reliably find it versus a slower deck. So you can just kind of wait, get 2 Silences in hand, silence them twice, then combo them off. So in this board, he had 4 Leyline of Sanctity as an anti-Jund, anti-discard, anti-whatever that targets you game plan. 2 more Silences for deck with counters, 4 Echoing Truth to answer hate cards. A Grapeshot, I guess, to diversify win conditions against like a Slaughter Games or a Cranial Extraction or something. 2 Needles also to answer hate cards. Not really sure what this Nihil Spellbomb is for. Grafdigger's Cage is probably for Storm as a Miser's card, because you have Reshape, so you can always just Reshape a 1-drop. Well, you cast it for 3, sack something, and get a 1-drop, which would be Grafdigger's Cage against like Storm. So I think the deck has a lot of little interactions that we'll probably see in the game, like Ghost Quartering, float a mana, Ghost Quarter your own land, get Plains or something, cast Second Sunrise, and so forth. Fetch lands are also kind of like mini rituals here, because you get lands out of your deck for the Second Sunrise. So yeah, this should be a pretty interesting deck to play. Here we go with match 1. Alright, so this hand seems pretty reasonable. Be a little bit better if I learned the play, but I hope he doesn't Thoughtseize the Lotus Bloom. No. Well, Lotus Bloom's getting the boot. So, also, now that I think about it, I think it's technically possible to win on a turn 2 or 3, given the right draw. It's just not very likely. You have to reshape a bunch of Lotus Blooms, and then sack them, and then cast Sunrise or Fate's Reward. I think he almost certainly has to take Bloom here. The other option is Reshape, actually. But let's see what he does. Also, it's pretty interesting to note that his life total does not matter whatsoever in this matchup, unless if he goes to 2 and I have like a single Pyrite Spellbomb activation. But the probability of that situation coming up is quite low. This is tough for him, I guess. I still think it's between Bloom and Reshape. Yep, and he takes Lotus Bloom. I am going to play this. I think I'm just going to get an island. Yeah, I'm gonna get an island. Play Chromatic Star that he knows about. So the other interesting part of this deck is it's actually somewhat resilient to discard, because you just leave all of your cantrip artifacts in play until the turn you're actually going off. Like, using them earlier just to cycle through your deck to try to draw lands is not very good, I think. So, Bob or Glyph. It's a Bob, which is actually probably better for him here. Not good for me. Sphere go. The worst card in the matchup. Some builds of eggs play Lab Maniac, but it's actually pretty easy to beat a Terminate with Lab Maniac. Chromatic Sphere's ability is kind of an abomination, in that the draw card does not use the stack, so you can just beat any number of removal spells on Lab Maniac with Chromatic Sphere. You can even beat a Sudden Shock because it's a mana ability, so you just crack it and they lose. He needs another creature here. I would really like to draw a fetch land next turn. I think I can do a bunch of things then. If I drew a fetch land, I would crack it for island. Actually, even Ghost Quarter works. But let's see what happens here. I think the debate is probably on whether to play a Tarmogoyf or play another discard spell. Or that, I guess. Alright, I'm gonna crack this sphere because I really would like to draw land. Alright, that is a very good draw, actually. I'm gonna reshape for 0. Get Lotus Bloom. Play Second Sunrise. Crack this for blue, I guess. Yeah, for blue. So, like, kind of, sort of academic by this point. Blue, blue, blue. Yeah, I'm gonna reshape into another Lotus Bloom. It's gonna take a while, but I think he's dead. Playing this deck is a lot of clicking. So I have 6, 7. I think he's tired of leaving up priority. Playing this deck quickly is somewhat of an issue, so yeah. He knows it's almost inevitable that he's dead that game. So the silences, Sleight of Hand, Gitaxian Probe. I want the Grapeshot as a redundant win condition, and I want the ley lines. So probably another ley line, or another Sleight of Hand. It kind of sucks to watch your opponent just sit there for a bunch of time and you not have any interaction with them. But unfortunately, that's how Eggs has to play basically every single game. Basically, when your game plan is to, like, draw your basically all of your deck every game, it's going to be very difficult to actually play in a fashion that is very quick. I mean, I think I was playing relatively quickly, but that still ate up a bunch of time on the clock. So this is even a bigger issue for IRL play. Alright, game 2. This is a pretty easy keep, I think. Kinda sucks that it has no cantrips, or no cantripping artifacts, but it has the best card in the matchup, which should buy a reasonable amount of time, so I'm gonna keep the hand. So a shortcut that a fair number of top players use is not just whether or not you're going to keep your opening hand, but to try to map out the first few turns of any given opening hand before you say keep or not. So like here I'm going to keep the hand, and the most likely play is Suspend Lotus Bloom and play Pyrite Spellbomb off of Island. Obviously, I'm going to reveal the turn 0 Leyline. Man, none of his hands are good. He might be mulliganing to Leyline of the Void, I guess, by this point. In which case, it's going to be hard for me to win. So, suspend, play Pyrite Spellbomb off Island. This is not really a good of show what would happen. I can actually wait another turn or two, I think, depending on what I draw. Like, basically, since I'm under no pressure, there's no reason to try to rush it. Except I think that might kill him, so... I'll sack Pyrite Spellbomb first. Reshape. Yeah, reshape that into a bloom as well. Cycle. Cycle for blue. Yeah, for blue. Wait, blue. I was supposed to, well, I can still do these things. Yeah, again, it's not very fun for him to watch me just do all those things. I think overall, Eggs is actually fairly ahead. If people have cards like Leyline of the Void, or they split their graveyard hate spells, I think the matchup becomes a lot tougher, like I mentioned earlier. But that game, he just didn't really draw anything that actually mattered.